When does Aelin get here, actually, guys? Oh, and a devastating turn of events. This is a different series, and it's not Throne of Glass. Hi, and welcome back to our ACOTAR recaps. I'm so excited to be talking about the next chunk of Mist and Fury with you. I did decide to split it up. I originally said I was going to do this book in 4 videos, but I said, why rush? Why rush? Let's do it in 5. Mostly because this next section that I was going to do seemed like it was going to be just like intensely long, and I wasn't going to be able to get it out to you if we went the full length until next week. And I figured, why not do one this week that's a little shorter rather than having like a 3+ hour one in a couple weeks. It'll be easier for me to edit, and then you'll get a little treat now and a little treat next week. So I figured it worked out best for everyone. So that's what I decided to do. So we'll just be recapping the next, I think, 10 or so chapters, A Court of Mist and Fury, where we will be going to Summer Court. That is like the big event of this section, and we'll also be meeting with the Mortal Queens. Let's do a little recap just so we can all be on the same page about what is currently happening. Okay, so Feyre left the Spring Court at the beginning of the last video after Tamlin locked her in the house, which was like very rude. Boo, annoying. And now she lives at the Night Court with Rhysand. She has been given the job of emissary to the human realm, which is a job that hasn't existed for 500 years. But since Rhys is in charge, he can make up jobs for the girl he has a crush on. And he shall and he will. Last video pretty much just covered Rhysand and Feyre going on a few bad field trips together. They went to go see the Bone Carver, who was like, the Kingdom of Hybern is trying to resurrect Jurian, and he has the cauldron, and you need to go get the Book of Breathings. And then they went and saw the Weaver to test Feyre's ability and also to go pick up a ring, which will come back. Don't worry about that. Feyre is just beginning to start unpacking everything that happened to her under the mountain, and also everything that happened to her post under the mountain with Tamlin. She has officially broken up with him. She sent him a letter being like, hi, I'm never coming back. I live in the Night Court now. And she's hoping this will prevent a war because there is some conversation. It's unclear if Tamlin has rights to her as her owner, sort of. The gender politics of Prythian aren't ideal, aren't great. Okay, before we actually jump into it, I'm gonna do a little book promo. Excuse me. I'm gonna have to for the next 6 months. Sorry, guys. It's very exciting. I actually got ARCs. I have this in physical form now. These are the words. Exciting. And there's a couple giveaways happening that I wanted to let you know about. The first one is another Goodreads giveaway. So if you entered the last one, I think you do have to enter again. You just have to add this to your want to read shelf, and then you're entered. But the better giveaway, because it's significantly more exclusive, is I'm also giving away an ARC, a signed one. I'll sign it for you, on my newsletter, and all you have to do is be signed up to my newsletter, and I'm giving it away to one person there. Your odds are substantially better if you sign up via my newsletter, because there are significantly less people in my newsletter than there are on Goodreads. So the odds are much better, and I would love for you to have a copy. It would be so fun to have one of the book girlies have an early copy. I'll be sending it out soon. Oh, also, if you are if you have NetGalley, whether you're a book influencer or a librarian or a bookseller or someone else who has NetGalley, it is available on NetGalley. So feel free to request it. If you have issues with requesting it, message me directly on Instagram, and I'll sort you out. Okay, perfect. We're also dressed for Summer Court today. This dress I bought and wore to the Eras tour with Taylor Swift. It is a full tulle dress. I'm wearing it with sweatpants underneath today, but I never had to wear it, and I decided today for Summer Court we're going to wear something fresh and festive. We open chapter 31 with Feyre up on the sparring ring that is on the roof of House of Wind. This time, strangely, Amren's up there, which is kind of weird vibes. Normally it's just her, Cassian, Azriel, maybe Rhysand. We learned that about 4 days have passed since the last time we checked in, and she has been spending her days kind of training up here. She spends her mornings training with Cassian and her afternoons training with Rhys, kind of to work on her magic. They still haven't heard back from Summer Court about their request to come visit, or from the Mortal Queens for their request to chat about the Book of Breathing. So they're just kind of waiting. They're just kind of holding out to see when that sort of stuff is going to happen. And then we hear a little flashback. We don't get to actually see this. We just get to see Feyre's reflections on it, but we hear that the night before, Feyre and the gang went to Rita's. All of them went to Rita's. And it's so disappointing that we don't actually get to see this. We just have to hear about it. But we do get a little recap. Everyone went. Her and Az spent a lot of time in the corner chatting and making bets on like who would be like brave enough to ask Rhysand out. And as one every single time, he knows the lay of the land. Rhysand was flirted with multiple times, but he said no. He turned down every single request because he has a crush on Feyre, obviously. Anyway, we just get this like impression that her and Az are like friends now, which is like cute. And then Mor also arrives at the sparring ring. Even weirder, maybe not. I think Mor would be more likely to show up at the sparring ring than Amren. Regardless, Mor also shows up at the sparring ring, which is abnormal. And Cassian's like, hey, where did you go last night? Like, she didn't go home with the rest of them. She left early. And Cassian didn't know where she went. But Mor refuses to say. But it's fine because Rhysand is about to arrive. The reason that Amren and Mor are here is because Rhysand has called a family meeting. He says, everyone to the House of Wind, we're going to chat, because he finally has heard back from Summer Court. He arrives and he's like, okay, Feyre, me, and Amren are going to go to Summer Court. And Cassian's like, I want to go to Summer Court. And Rhysand says, you can't come to Summer Court. Last time you visited it didn't end well. And Cassian goes, I wrecked one building. They're being too dramatic. And then Rhysand is like, also, they're like terrified of Amren. She's like scary, spooky to them. And so she will be like a better threat to have than you. And Cassian's like, well, we could both come. Amren and I could both come. It could possibly be a trap. Like, it would make more sense for me to come. Cassian really wants to go to Summer Court. And I really want to know what the heck he was doing in Summer Court. I don't recall ever finding out what happens with Cassian in Summer Court. I just think we know that there was a building that was destroyed by Cassian in the Summer Court. Anyway, Rhys is like, it's fine. We do not need both of you. Amren is plenty. If there's a trap, she will be able to handle it. I will be able to handle it. Between the two of us, we will be fine. Also, like, Feyre has powers too. And then Amren's not super enthused about the idea of Summer Court, going to Summer Court, but then Rhys is like, probably the High Lord of the Summer Court, who's like new in town. He's like new to High Lordship, probably doesn't have like a great inventory of what they have in their treasure trove. So maybe you could do some stealing while we were there, Amren. And Amren's like, oh my gosh, what a great idea. That sounds perfect. That's that. Meeting adjourned. Feyre, Amren, and Rhys are going to Summer Court. And Feyre like follows Rhysand out to like chat with him as they exit. And she's like, hey, should I know about any traps in this plan? Like, is there a secret plan that I don't know about? And Rhysand is like, come on. I thought you had forgiven me for the whole situation with the adder. All those notes about licking seemed like we were good. That typically means like healed. Everyone ready to go. Feyre just says, one would think a High Lord would have more important things to do than pass notes back and forth all night. And Rhys responds, I have more important things to do, but I find myself unable to resist the temptation. The same way you can't resist watching me whenever we're out. So territorial. Essentially making a comment on how Feyre was just keeping her eyes on Rhys all last night, which we just heard about from her perspective. And then Feyre says, you haven't been able to stay away from me since Kellenmai, it seems. And then Rhys makes a little face. He does make a little face. And he flicks her in the nose, which is weird behavior, okay? It is weird behavior. Sometimes Rhysand doesn't know how to behave. But you know what? I am going to say we are improving. He hasn't bitten her like Tamlin. Tamlin, remember that one time he bit her? That was weird. And remember Under the Mountain, Rhysand one time did lick away her tear with his tongue. So, you know, a flick on the nose is an improvement, I would have to say. This is preferable. I think it's the next day. Maybe it's a couple days. I don't know. It's Summer Court time. And Cassian is unable to convince Rhys. He tries a little bit harder to see if he can convince Rhys that he should go to Summer Court with them, but it does not work. So it's just Amren, Feyre, and Rhys headed to Summer Court. They get ready to leave. They're all in like cutie little outfits. Feyre has like dressed to impress. This reminds me, I follow this woman on Instagram whose name is Elizabeth Holmes, not the Theranos woman, but this woman who talks about royal fashion. And she mostly talks about Kate Middleton. And she talks about like how her outfits indicate like a message that she's trying to convey. And I think the message we're trying to convey here is very much like cutie, like from the summer. They're coming from Night Court, but they clearly have like Summer Court inspirations. They're trying to like really indicate an alliance between the two courts with the outfit. Feyre's wearing this like cute purple like chiffon gown, and the shadow wraiths have curled her hair, so she's looking like cute and pretty, and she's kind of excited about it. But Rhys just like looks at her and is like, let's go. Rude, compliment her outfit, please. And Amren is like, he's just in a bad mood this morning. And Feyre's like, why? And Rhysand says, I stayed out late with Cassian and Azriel, and they took me for all I was worth in cards last night. And Feyre's like, You're a sore loser? And Rhys says, I am my brother's tag team me. And then he vanishes. They went out directly into Summer Court, and we get like some descriptions of Summer Court. It is so cute. The city they're staying in is right on the ocean, and all of the buildings are made out of this like white substance that glimmers, kind of like a mother of pearl sort of situation. It sounds gorgeous. There are like seagulls everywhere. There are lots of like bridges and island. It sounds like coastal Italy is my impression. Rhysand introduces Feyre to Tarquin, the new High Lord of the Summer Court, and he's like, hey, I know you guys didn't get to like formally meet under the mountain. And we also see Amren kind of come in, and Amren and Rhysand are both like have put on their like night court cold and like calculated exteriors. Like they're playing the game. Amren comes up to Tarquin and like is introducing herself, and she says, my condolences about your cousin. He was such an eyesore, and you are so much more handsome than her. There's just like a sharpness and this almost wickedness to Amren and Rhysand that they kind of both put on, and Feyre is trying to figure out where she fits into this. She knows like she's known as this girl that was with Tamlin and is now with Rhys in the night court, and she knows that there's this kind of this posturing that they're kind of positioning her as like Rhysand's like new pet, his new like just like plaything. But also she knows she needs to put on a little bit of that like sharpness, this coldness. She can't like act like she's been kidnapped by the night court. Like that wouldn't go over well. She needs to act like she's like excited to be there, on board. And because the impression that Amren and Rhysand are giving is kind of this like cold, calculated, Feyre needs to embody that a bit as well. Also, as she's meeting Tarquin, she's having this like weird sort of experience in which her body is remembering him. His magic and her magic like know each other. She can like almost feel her magic like reaching out for him. Like calls to like, of course, as we know. And Tarquin is like giving Feyre the up and down, because I think he probably has a similar sense, and her dress is very low cut, and he winds up like staring kind of like at her chest. Feyre explains it like this. His gaze drifted down to my chest, the bare skin revealed by the sweeping V of my gown, as if he could see where that spark of life, his power, had gone. Rhys follows that gaze and says, damn, her breasts are rather spectacular, aren't they? Delicious and as ripe as apples. You know, just to like cut the tension there. And Feyre says, and here I was thinking you had a fascination with my mouth. And Rhysand loves that Feyre's playing. That is like he loves when they get to be flirty and bantery. It's truly his favorite thing in the world. And so he's delighted by this. But immediately the delight leaves. Like it flashes in his eyes, and then he, tucks it away because they're doing official business. They can't be make flirterson in front of these people. They're invited inside and they're given refreshments, and we meet a couple more people. We meet Cressida, who is this princess of Adriata, which is the city that they're in. And Feyre's kind of trying to figure out like what the relationship between Cressida and Tarquin is, and trying to figure out whether they're wife or sisters, whether she is his wife or his sister. Neither of them have rings on. I don't think they're either of those things. I think she's just like princess of this town. Feyre immediately like clocks that Cressida is incredibly like sharp and not to be underestimated and cunning. Feyre is again just like trying to play this role that she can see Rhysand and Amra playing, these like aloof people from the night court. And as Feyre is continually introduced to more people, she can tell that everyone is really keeping a close eye on Amren. And she also notices that Amren is sticking pretty close to her. And Feyre is like, I wonder if Amren has been kind of instructed to act as somewhat of my bodyguard, to just like be an extra set of hands on me. Like Rhysand knows that he can take care of himself, but he wants to make sure Feyre is also taken care of. And then we're introduced to another important guy, and this guy's name is Varian, and he is the captain of Tarquin's guard. That's right, he's the Kale in this situation. Varian already has his eyes fixed on Amren as if he's ready to kill her if need be, and Amren loves it. Feyre is like, Amren loves this attention. Like, Amren loves to not be underestimated. She loves that this handsome man is seeing her as a threat and keeping his eyes on her. She enjoys that. And Feyre's kind of like walking around this beautiful palace, and they talk about, as like Tarquin is like explaining kind of the work they're doing to rebuild the city after Amarantha caused so much destruction here. And he explains this is the castle where they normally spend their winter and spring months. And Feyre is again struck by this impulse to like paint, to like depict this place like she had been in the fighting rings, the sparring rings last video. But again, we just get this like glimpse that like Feyre is getting her color back. It's very so long, Linen. She's just getting color back into her face. She's just mad as hell because she loves this place for so long. Tamlin. Feyre and Tarquin kind of end up at the window together to chat. Everyone else on the other side of the room, and they're definitely like paying attention to what Feyre and Tarquin are saying. Everyone is like very interested in like what these two will have to chat about. They begin chatting, and Tarquin starts to ask about her experience being human versus like being Fae, and just kind of what she's been up to since Under the Mountain. And he's just like basically looking for information. He's trying to like kind of figure out what's happening with the like Tamlin Rhysand situation, all of that. And Feyre thinks this actually could be a good opportunity. Maybe like if she's able to get a little bit closer to Tarquin to like flirt with him, to convince him that she's like not a threat at all, it'll be easier to steal from him. Because remember, they're here to get the Book of Breathings. But then he brings up Under the Mountain specifically, and it sends her into a little bit of a PTSD flashback. But luckily, she's able to calm herself. They like practiced by going to the Weaver, a very high stakes environment. And now she's cool. Now she can just like calm herself down in a regular conversation. Maybe we could have started here. And then Tarquin asks her, how exactly do you fit in with Rhysand's court? And Feyre almost says to him, like, I don't know. But Rhysand, luckily, who's been like eavesdropping on the whole conversation, cuts in and says, Feyre is a member of my inner circle and is my emissary to my mortal lands. To the mortal lands. And Cressida seems like super surprised by this because like emissary to the mortal lands is not a position that would typically be held within a mortal court. And Rhysand is like, I prefer to be prepared for every potential situation, and given that Hybern seems set on making themselves a nuisance, striking up a conversation with the humans seems like it might be in our best interests. And then from there, the conversation kind of shifts to this war with Hybern and the conversation around like what an alliance might look like and what that would look like going forward between the two of them. And Tarquin kind of implies that Rhysand would also be willing to go to war over Feyre, and Tarquin is not interested in that sort of war, this like inter-Prythian war between like the Night Court and the Spring Court over a girly. And Feyre starts like panicking because she's like, no, I sent a letter to like have Tamlin stand down. I don't want to start a war. Like I will not allow like a war to be had over me. Like that feels quite silly. She already saw so much like loss of life under the mountain, and she's like unwilling to cause more just for like her to not have to be at Tamlin's house. Feyre's like, no, that's not happening. And Cressida says, oh, so you aren't in contact with Tamlin yet. And Feyre says, there are things that are public knowledge and things that are not. My relationship with him is well known. Its current standing, however, is none of your concern, or anyone else's. But I do know Tamlin, and I do know that there will be no internal war between courts, or at least not over me and my decision. And Cressida says, oh my gosh, that's such relief to know that we are not harboring a stolen bride, that we need not bother returning her to her master as the law demands, as any wise person might do, to keep trouble from their doorstep. And Feyre's like, what do you mean? Like, I left of my own free will. I was not kidnapped by Rhysand. And I am my own master. And Cressida says, think that all you want, lady, but the law is the law. You are his bride. Swearing fealty to another high lord does not change that. So it is a very good thing that he respects your decision. Otherwise, all it would take is one letter from him to Tarquin requesting your return, and we would have to obey or risk war ourselves. And Rhysand just goes, always a joy, Cressida. Always a joy. And you know what? I am fascinated by Cressida. I think she's really interesting. She reminds me a little of my beloved Nesta. And we won't get very much Nesta. We get like a little taste of Nesta this chunk, but not very much Nesta at all. So we'll have to take Cressida as a lesser but like substitution. And I do think this is interesting because Cressida is this woman who like clearly does have some power within the Summer Court, but is also aware of her status as a woman within Prythian, and she has such limited power that I think she gets a little mean here in order to maintain it. You gotta be a little ruthless sometimes. Maybe you don't have to, but Cressida feels she does. Tarquin's really not into all of this snide, passive-aggressive sort of arguing. He says, ew, that's not what we're here for. We're here for a fun time. He says, guys, these are our guests. We're not going to send them over to Tamlin's house. That would be mean. Also, we're having a party tonight on a pleasure barge, which sounds super fun. And this immediately reminded me of one of the least relatable Taylor Swift lyrics that I've ever heard, because my brain is 50% Taylor Swift lyrics. I can connect almost anything to a Taylor Swift lyric if you give me a moment. And that is, I no longer have to pretend that I like to be on a mega yacht, in which from, is it really over now? Because I have never been on a mega yacht, but I do believe I would like it. This sounds like a great time. I love to be on a boat. A really, really nice boat. Sounds delightful. Anyway, they're going to a boat party tonight. And this does sound super nice. And honestly, Summer Court is starting to give the place I would like to be. Like, I think I might want to be in Summer Court. Night Court sounds nice and all, but I'm really not digging the, like, one cutie city and the rest of the country is evil vibe. Not really my favorite. I don't think that is great politickings. I don't want to be in Spring Court. Sounds like a bad time. Sounds a little too floral. I think I would always have a headache. Summer Court, though. Summer Court might be for me. It's kind of giving in the Magnolia Park series. If you've watched my videos on those, you know that they go to Lake Como a lot. And I love when they go to Lake Como because I would like to be in Lake Como at all moments. I think Lake Como could heal me. I also think a trip to Summer Court could heal me. Anything that ails me, Summer Court would fix it. And then Tarquin says to Rhysand, don't mind Cressida. She's made a lot of sacrifices on behalf of her people. Don't take this caution against a war with Tamlin personally. And Rhysand says, we all made sacrifices. The icy boredom now shifts into something razor sharp. Rhys continues, and now you sit at this table with your family because of the ones Feyre made. So you will forgive me, Tarquin, if I tell your princess that if she sends word to Tamlin, or if any of your people bring her to him, their lives will be forfeit. And Feyre notes that even the sea breeze dies at that. Like, Rhys is serious. He says, none of you will be giving Feyre back to Tamlin. She said she wanted to hang out with me, and none of you are going to stop her. Okay. And Tarquin's like, whoa, do not threaten me in my own house, Rhysand. My gratitude only goes so far. And Rhys says, hey, I'm not threatening you. It's actually a promise. And then they all look at Feyre, and Feyre's like, no wonder immortality never gets dull. And she's just like, again, like playing this role. And Rhysand sends this like approval through the bond, and like Tarquin like kind of laughs, and she can feel like the tension break. Later that night, Rhysand and her are in their rooms. They're given interconnected rooms that both overlook the ocean. And Rhys and Feyre are in their rooms chatting. And Rhys is like having a hard time because he likes Tarquin. And he kind of likes Cressida. And he doesn't love Varian. Varian gives him weird vibes, but Varian and Amren seem to get along pretty well. And he actually thinks like Varian, if given the opportunity, would get along really well with Cassian and Azriel. And so then he like could be friends and could be bros. One thing about Rhysand is he does value male friendship. That is one of his core pillars, one of his central tenets. And so of course he wants to be pals with Tarquin. And he's gonna have to steal from him, and that is gonna ruin everything. And Feyre's like, okay, well, maybe we could just do this without getting caught. And Rhysand's like, I mean, yeah, that would be ideal. Also, have you noticed that Tarquin can't stop staring at you? I don't know if it's because he can like sense your power, or because how much he would like to sleep with you. And Feyre's like, I think it's maybe both. And Rhys is like, for sure. But like having a high lord lust after you is a dangerous game. Feyre should know. And Feyre's like, okay, enough. First you taunted me with Cassian, now Tarquin. Can't you find some other way to annoy me? And Rhys says, you have one task here, Feyre. One task that no one can know about. So do anything you have to in order to accomplish that. But get that book and do not get caught. And Feyre's like, anything. Rhys is like... And Feyre's like, if I slept with him, what would you do? And Rhys just looks at her. His pupils flare, which I do think is a sign of a concussion. Maybe he should get his head checked out. Maybe he bonked it when he was busy gawking at Feyre. He's like has his hand on like the dresser, and the dresser is like literally groaning from where he's gripping the wood so hard. And he says to her, you say such atrocious things. You are always free to do whatever you want with whomever you want. So if you want to give him a ride, go ahead. And Feyre says, maybe I will. And Rhys is like, fine. And Feyre's like, fine. And then Rhys is like, do not jeopardize this mission. And Feyre says, I know the cost. At this point, they're inches apart from each other. They're like in the window. The sea breeze is blowing. Ugh, it'd be so gorgeous. I want to see this with my eyeballs. I feel, as I'm rereading this, I'm feeling betrayed that we didn't get the TV show. But that's okay. It'll come when it's supposed to. And then Rhys is like, light that candle. Instead of lighting the candle, Feyre chucks a bucket of water at it, which is like really surprising to her as well as to Feyre. Like, she didn't intend to throw water at the candle, but because she's so close to Tarquin, his magic is much easier to access. Feyre thinks to herself, she has so much more power than she had ever realized. She thinks to herself, I was no one was my master, but I might be a master of everything if I wished, if I dared. Like a strange rain, the water rose from the floor as I willed it to become like the stars Rhys had summoned from his blanket of darkness. I willed the droplets to separate until they hung around us, catching the light and sparkling like crystals on a chandelier. And Rhys says to her, I suggest you don't show Tarquin that trick in the bedroom. And then Feyre just throws all that water on Rhys, but he's able to shield most of it off, and it winds up like he gets wet from some of it, and Feyre gets like the deflected water, and she's wet as well. And they're just like smiling and giggling like, a bit, and then Rhys just says to her, keep practicing. And then the topic of conversation kind of shifts. And Feyre just asks Rhys, will he go to war for me? Obviously talking about Tamlin. And Rhys says, I don't know. And Feyre says, I would go back if it came to that, Rhysand. I would go back rather than make you fight. And Rhys says, would you want to go back? Would going to war on your behalf make you love him again? Would that be a grand gesture for you? And Feyre says, I am tired of death. I wouldn't want to see anyone else die, least of all for me. And Rhysand says, that doesn't answer my question. And Feyre says, no, I wouldn't want to go back, but I would. Pain and killing would not win me. And Rhys says to her, he locked you up because he knew. The bastard knew what a treasure you are, that you are worth more than land or gold or jewels. He knew, and he wanted to keep you all to himself. And Feyre's like, okay, calm down. He's not like twirling his mustache. Like, he really did love me, Rhysand. And Rhys says, no, the issue wasn't whether he loved you. It's how much. Too much. Love can be a poison. Then Rhys just leaves. And Feyre's like, okay, we're all like that. They're on the pleasure barge. They're on the mega yacht having a really lovely time. And Feyre finds herself sitting next to Tarquin, who's wearing a crown and just kind of complaining about how uncomfortable wearing a crown is. And they're just kind of chatting. And Feyre like gestures at the crown and asks, like, how did you prevent this from falling into Amarantha's hands? And she's also dressed super cute. She's in like a super pink, cute gown. And she thinks to herself, as she's dressed in the soft pink gown, she thinks to herself, I hadn't felt like those things in a long, long time. Super soft and feminine. Hadn't wanted to, but here, being those things wouldn't earn me a ticket to a life of party planning. From here, I could be soft and lovely at sunset and awake in the morning to slide into Illyrian fighting leathers. This is so important. I really feel like this is kind of like the thesis statement to a lot of romantasy, especially Sarah J. Maas romantasy. This is something that will come up often in her books, the ability to be soft and feminine and also not having that prevent you from being fierce and tough. I think it's so important, and I think this moment for Feyre is so important as she is able to kind of step into both. She's been forced to be kind of either extreme, when she was growing up in poverty with her sister, she was forced to be this tough girly who just went out and hunted in the forest, did not have kind of the softness and the luxuries of everyday life. And I mean, we even see with what Nesta taunts her with as considering her almost to be somewhat feral. And then with Tamlin, she's locked in this house and dressed in these gowns and not allowed to do anything. And she hated that as well. And she's really now at a place where she can do both. She can be pretty in the evenings and wear the dresses and go to the fun parties, but then she can also fight and work for something, and that balance is incredibly important. Anyway, Feyre asked Tarquin how he kept all of his stuff safe when Amarantha was here, and Tarquin says, we managed to smuggle out most of our treasures when the territory fell. His predecessor was his cousin, and he served as prince of another city, so he got the order to hide the Troves in the dead of night as fast as they could. And we learned that the summer court in general kind of really highly values treasure. It's just one of their pillars and tenets. They just having fun stuff. Again, what a fun place to hang out. What a vacation destination. And Feyre's oh, that sounds so cool. I would love to get a tour of your troves. Can outsiders see the collection? My father was a merchant and I spent most of my childhood in his offices helping with his goods. It would be interesting to compare mortal riches to Fey hands, to the ones made by Fey hands. Obviously, this is mostly a ploy to get into the Trove so she can see his stuff, so she can figure out where the Book of Breathings is, and so she can steal it. But Tarquin immediately is oh yeah, of course, tomorrow after lunch I can give you a tour. And then they continue chatting and he starts asking her about the immortal world and her impression of things. And Feyre kind of tells her life story and explains how her father became very poor when she was around 11 and how difficult it was to live in poverty. And she talks about how little she actually got to see of the mortal world because of their poverty. And she says that money seems to be the only thing that really matters to the humans on the other side of the wall. Once they became poor, they lost so many of their friends and so many of their connections, and no one really looked out for them, and no one really cared for them. And Tarquin says, well, it seems like you don't really have a fondness for the humans. Would you still want to spare them if the war came? And Feyre says, yeah, my sisters dwell with my father on his estate. For them I would fight, but for the sycophants and the peacocks, I would not mind to see their order disrupted. And then Tarquin is you know what, honestly, there's very similar class and caste distinctions here in Prythian as well. And some people have suggested a similar disruption here. And Feyre's like, oh, do they want to get rid of the High Lords? And Tarquin is like, I mean, maybe, but like mostly eliminate the inherited privileges of the High Fae over the lesser fairies. Even the term is like unfair. It suggests the unfairness within the term itself. Maybe it is more like the human realm than you realize. It's not as blurred as it might seem. In some courts, the lowest of the High Fae servants have more rights than even the wealthiest of the lesser Fae. And Feyre says, oh, interesting. Like, do you agree with them that should change? Is that something that you think should change? And Tarquin says, I am a young High Lord, barely 80. Perhaps others might call me inexperienced or foolish. But I have seen those cruelties firsthand, and I have known a good many lesser fairies who suffered for merely being born on the wrong side of power, even within my own residencies. The confines of tradition pressure me to enforce the rules of my predecessors. The lesser fairies are to be neither seen nor heard as they work. I would like one day to see Prythian as a place as where they can both have voice, both in my home and beyond it. And Feyre's like, oh man, this guy's like super likable and also seems like a good guy. It's kind of a bummer that we have to steal from him. Tarquin catches her making a face and he's like, tell me what that look means. Feyre says, I'm thinking it would be very easy to love you and easier to call you my friend. And Tarquin says, I would not object to either. And Feyre thinks to herself, easy, very easy to fall in love with a kind, considerate male. Then she looks up and she sees Cressida sitting in Rhysand's lap. And Rhysand is getting a little handsy with Cressida. And Feyre thinks to herself, oh, I really hope if they're going to go home tonight, they go to Cressida's room, not Rhysand. I don't know if I could tolerate hearing that through the walls. And then Tarquin sees Feyre, like, watching Cressida and Rhys, and he says to Feyre, it has been many years since I saw her look like that. And Feyre immediately, like, feels ashamed that she felt so jealous. Like, she shouldn't be jealous of him, and she, like, wants him to have good things, and she thinks to herself, I had loved once and wasted it. Rhys deserved to have something like this. He deserves it. And then as she's, like, thinking that, she's realizing, like, how lonely she is and how she's been, like, lonely for a very long time, and she thought she maybe her and Rhys were, like, gonna have something, a friendship that maybe could turn into something more. She's just, like, really never had, like, a friend. I think a friend more than anything, because she's had, like, a couple, like, partners in terms of, like, physical stuff, but, like, Rhysand was never really her partner in terms of, like, emotionally, and neither was, like, Isaac when she was in the human world is what we're told, and her sisters have never kind of been that for her. And I think she was really hoping and kind of seeing something blossom between her and Rhysand that had this level of, like, deep intimacy on an interpersonal level, and then, like, maybe that would have turned into something physical at some point. Maybe Rhys isn't interested in that from her, and it's hurting her feelings, making her sad. And then she watches as Rhys leans in closer to whisper in Cressida's ear, and Feyre thinks to herself, it wasn't sorrow or despair or terror that hit me, but unhappiness. Such bleak, sharp unhappiness that I got to my feet. And Feyre looks up as Rhys looks up as Feyre stands, and it's unclear to Feyre if he can feel what she's feeling. She doesn't know if she, like, really has her shields up, but she, like, doesn't care. Rhys slides a little closer to Cressida, but even in her unhappiness, as Feyre, like, leaves the room, she realizes that it's manageable. Like, it's unhappiness, it's not depression, it's a passing emotion, not the deep despair she was feeling before, and that is comforting, even though she's, like, having a sad bummer moment. And she's like, I need some fresh air, to Tarquin, and Tarquin offers to come with her, but she says, no, thank you. And even though it would be so easy to fall in love with him, she thinks, I looked at the High Lord of Summer. I hadn't lied. It would be easy to fall in love with a male like him. But I wasn't entirely sure that, even with the hardships he'd encountered under the mountain, that Tarquin could understand the darkness that might always be in me. Not only from Amarantha, but from years spent being hungry and desperate. That I might always be a little vicious or restless. That I might crave peace, but never a cage of comfort. And so she just leaves by herself. And then halfway outside, she spots Amren and Varian, and they're just, like, standing kind of near each other, drinking wine and ignoring each other, even though they're the only two people, like, on this deck of the boat. And they, like, don't talk to anyone else. They're just, like, occupying the same space, actively ignoring each other. Okay, clearly some chemistry and some tension up here. Feyre goes up to the upper deck, stands out there, and realizes she came out here hoping that Rhys would follow her, but he never comes. She's out there for an hour by herself. By the time they dock, she's still alone, and when she gets off the boat, Rhysand and Cressida do not return to the palace with them. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to call the police on Rhysand. Beep, boop, 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 boop. This is 0 out of 10 behavior. I know you have a crush on Feyre, and I know we also have a mission to do, as he'll come to explain. I just think this was mean. I think this was mean, and it was unnecessary. I think it was mean. I know he could feel that she was sad lady in her bones, because they are not great at shielding from each other. That night, there is no sound from Rhysand's bedroom. Thank goodness. So they either go back to Cressida's room or elsewhere. But Feyre has a nightmare of being cooked over a spit, and when she wakes up, it takes her a second to remember where she is, and she thinks to herself as she lays in this bed in the summer court that she misses Valeris. She just like wishes she was back there. She like misses the inner court. She like misses all of it, and it's like a really sweet little moment, because I think even if Feyre is unwilling to admit it at this point, like Valeris is beginning to really feel like a home to her in a way she hadn't experienced in a long time. And then she starts thinking about Rhys and how he's just out there flirting with another girl. And she's like, well, like, maybe he was just like trying to fix me. You know, like one would fix a weapon that is in your arsenal so it doesn't break and like take care of it. Like maybe he didn't really want like friendship or something more. Maybe the flirting was just a way to like keep me from breaking. And she's like, you know, that's totally fine. We don't owe each other anything. We can still be like friends, even if he's sleeping with someone else. But like, she's really sad. She's really sad. And again, this, once again, is why Feyre needs a friend. Feyre needs not a friend that's a boy. She needs a friend that's a girl. She does. She needs a friend that's a girl that can be like, oh, Rhysand is obsessed with you. Mor would be happy to do it. If she said all this to Mor, Mor would say, hi, bestie. My cousin Rhys, he's literally obsessed with you. Literally so obsessed with you. But she doesn't have anyone. Amren would probably tell her to, but she's not going to ask. She's so upset with it, so upset about it, that she does not go to breakfast the next day because she doesn't want to risk seeing Rhysand and Cressida together. She just like lays in bed till it's lunchtime, and it's time for her to go on her visit with Tarquin. And like right before lunch, the servants are like, hey girlie, can we get you ready? I know you've been sleeping all freaking morning, but like you gotta go to lunch. And she goes and she plays in the bath, and she makes these little water animals with Tarquin's magic, and she just like has a fun little time in the bath. And then she gets ready to go see Tarquin when Tarquin emerges from Rhysand and Amren from a meeting that they were having. Feyre is dressed in like a seafoam green outfit, and it matches Tarquin's. Like, Nuala is working overtime. We love her. Clearly she understands that your outfit sends a message, and that's the message that she wants to send. She can feel Rhysand staring at her, and Feyre like very actively makes the choice like not to speak or look at Rhysand, only talking to Amren and Tarquin. And then she's like, bye, see you later, like vaguely to the room. And she can feel Rhys like brush against her mental shields, and she doesn't know exactly what, but it just like feels like a rumble of something dark and powerful that seems like maybe a warning to be careful. Bestie, it's Rhys being jealous, obviously. And then Feyre gives the High Lord of Summer. She doesn't let him pass her shields. She doesn't let Rhys pass her shields. Instead, she decides to give the Lord of Summer, Tarquin, a flirty little smile that she hadn't given anyone else in a long, long time. And then the brush of emotion goes silent on the other side of the shield, and Feyre thinks to herself, good. Then Tarquin takes her on a tour of some of the troves. They go to a hall of jewels and treasures. It is like huge and crazy, just like stuffed to the brim with beautiful things. And she's chatting with Tarquin as they go through it. And he explains that it's just like one of the troves, that they have many. And Tarquin's like, yeah, my ancestors were greedy bastards. And there are just like boxes overflowing with jewelry and pearls and gems and all sorts of like beautiful weaponry and like all sorts of things. And then Feyre takes in the whole room and asks, okay, what's the most valuable thing in here? And Tarquin says to her, thinking of stealing? And Feyre chokes on a laugh. Wouldn't that question make me a lousy thief? And Tarquin says to her, I think I'm looking at the most valuable thing in here. Tarquin knows how to flirt. That's a great line, Tarquin. I love it. Obviously meaning Feyre. And Feyre's like, you're very kind. And Tarquin's like, but really, I don't actually know the most valuable thing in here. They're all like priceless heirlooms. And Feyre like continues to look around, and she's like trying to reach out with her magic to see if anything like calls to her in the same way the ring did at the Weavers, and also just like her magic like speaks to Tarquin's magic. And she's admiring like a particularly nice necklace, nothing that is connecting to her magic, but just like a nice necklace, when Tarquin comes up to her and says, take it for everything you did under the mountain. And Feyre is like, maybe I should ask him for the book instead. Like maybe I should just ask. Have you considered that? Maybe we don't need to steal the book. Maybe we can just ask for it. But she decides, like, no, that requires too much trust. If she asks and they say no, then like they will know that that's what they're looking for, and they will have a much harder time stealing it. Tarquin explains that Feyre was like one of the first people not to laugh at Tarquin when he talked about his thoughts around like breaking down the class distinctions between the High Fae and the Lesser Fae, and he really like values her because of that. And he also talks about how he and then he gives Feyre this necklace, and Tarquin says it'll suit you in the night court. And then he says to her, like, I could really use an ally in the north, and kind of proposes that she act as an emissary to the summer court, between the night court and the summer court. And he talks about his experience on the mountain with Rhysand, and how Rhysand is supposed to be this like horrible, cruel, scary guy, but honestly he experienced him as like quite kind most of the time. And he shares that his cousin was that guy. We saw it in Court of Thorns and Roses. His cousin was one of the men who was trying to escape through the tunnels, and he was caught by Amarantha, and Amarantha instructed Rhys to like dig through his mind, and Rhys pretended he didn't see anything, and it was part of a larger plot, and Tarquin knew that, and Rhys like covered it up and then like spared him by killing him. And he also knows that like Rhys has not tried to take advantage of him. Like we've mentioned, Tarquin is an extraordinarily young High Lord and is very inexperienced, and he knows that a lot of the people would have used this as an opportunity to kind of manipulate him, and he's not sensed that at all from Rhys. And he's like, I know Rhys is supposed to be this like scary guy, but I like don't think he is. I know I'm supposed to look at you and see that he's made you into a pet, a monster, but I see the kindness in you, and I think that reflects more on him than anything. I think it shows that you and he may have many secrets. And Feyre's like, stop, I can't tell you anything. You were like clearly getting to something secret, and like I can't reveal any secrets. Like my loyalty is to Rhysand, the High Lord. I serve only his court. And Tarquin's like, sorry, forgive me if I'm being forward, but I'm still learning how to play these games. Feyre's like, I hope you never learn how to play the games of the courts. And then Tarquin says to her, allow me to ask you a blunt question. Is it true that you left Tamlin because he locked you in the house? And Feyre just nods, and Tarquin continues. Is it true that you were saved by confinement by the night courts? She nods again. Tarquin says, the spring court is my southern neighbor. I have tenuous ties with them, but unless asked, I will not mention that you are here. And Feyre thinks, I do not deserve this man's alliance. We are going to rob him blind. But she says, thank you. And then she has to see more of his troves. And he agrees, saying, I didn't want to go to my afternoon meetings anyway. Then as they're leaving, he says to her, I think it might be very easy to love you too, Feyre. Easier to be your friend. Feyre like listens as the door like locks behind her, and then they go from room to room as he like continues to show her treasures and jewels. Again, no hint of that like trickle of power that she knows the Book of Breathings will have. And she spends the whole afternoon with him looking at all these places, but she can't find it anywhere. It's like clearly not in any of these treasure rooms that he's showing her, and she's trying to figure out like where else it could be. She returns to her room and finds Rhys lying on her bed, and she's like, what do you want? And Rhys is like, flirting and giggling with Tarquin did you no good. I take it. Feyre throws the box with the necklace in it at him, and Rhys is like, okay, well, this isn't a book. And Feyre's like, no, but it's a nice gift. Tarquin is a good man. He is a good High Lord. We should just ask him for the book. And Rhys is like, you've spent the afternoon with him, and now you're feeling too generous and bad for him. And Feyre is like, no, I really think he wants your alliance. He like really wants to trust you. He wants to rely on you. He wants to be your friend. He like wants to form a formal alliance between the night court and the summer court. And Rhys is like, okay, well, Cressida actually said her cousin is like very ambitious, so be careful. He might not be telling you the whole story. So I guess Cressida is his cousin. Mystery solved by me earlier that I forgot. And Feyre snaps. Oh, did she tell you that before or after? Before, during, or after she took you to her bed? And Rhys is like, oh, is that why you won't look at me? Because you think I slept with her for information? And Feyre bites out, information or for your own pleasure. I don't even care. I don't even care a little bit. So information or not, it doesn't bother me at all. And Rhys comes even closer, hardly a hand's breadth between them. Jealous, Feyre? He asks. Feyre fires back. If I'm jealous, then you're jealous. And Rhys says, do you think I particularly like having to flirt with a lonely female to get information about her court, her High Lord? Do you think I feel good about myself doing that? Do you think I enjoy it? Just so you can have the space to play Tarquin with your smiles and pretty eyes so we can get the book and go home? And Feyre says, you seem to enjoy yourself plenty last night, Rhys. Rhys responds, I didn't take her to bed. She wanted to, but I didn't so much as kiss her. I took her out for a drink in the city, brought her back to her room, and went no further than the door. I waited for you at breakfast, but you slept in, or avoided me, apparently, and I tried to catch your eye this afternoon, but you were so good at shutting me out completely. Feyre snaps. That's what got under your skin, right? That I shut you out? Or was it that it was so easy for Tarquin to get in? And Rhys says, what got under my skin is that you smiled at him. You're jealous. Rhys admits it. I heard what you told him, that you thought it would be easy to fall in love with him. You meant it too. And Feyre says, so? Rhys continues, I was jealous of that I'm not the sort of person for anyone. The summer court has always been neutral. They only showed backbone during those years under the mountain. I spared Tarquin's life because I'd heard how he wanted to love even the playing field between the High Fae and the Lesser Fairies. I've been trying to do that for years unsuccessfully, but I spared him for that alone. And Tarquin, with his neutral court, he'll never have to worry about someone walking away because of a threat against their life. Their children's lives will always be there. So yes, I was jealous of him because it will always be easy for him, and he will never know what it is to look up at the night sky and wish. And Feyre thinks, the court of dreams, the people who knew that there was a price and one worth paying for that dream. The bastard-born warriors, the Illyrian half-breeds, the monster trapped in a beautiful body, the dreamer born into a court of nightmares, and the huntress with an artist's soul. And then Feyre pours herself a drink, and she joins him where he's standing at this little bar that's against the windows in their room. And she raises the glass. She says, to the people who look up at the stars and wish, Rhys. Picks up his glass, his gaze so piercing that she wonders why she had bothered blushing for Tarquin at all. Rhys clinks his glass against hers. To the stars who listen, he says, and the dreams that are answered. This is a high key. Is it important? I feel like it's thematically important moment in which we see Tarquin could never understand Feyre because he hasn't seen hardship, but Rhys knows hardship. He's seen it because he went to war camp. I'm not exactly sure why he's so much more qualified than Tarquin. I guess he had a really bad time under the mountain, where Tarquin only had a sort of bad time under the mountain. And he's friends with people who've had a hard time. We're just supposed to take this at face value, that he will give Feyre peace, but also will cage her with comfort, the things that she was worried about with Tarquin. They spend the next 2 days at the summer court. Feyre tries her best to kind of search the entire city for any hint of the Book of Breathings. I don't know why they are sure it's going to be in this city. We learn that this is only the castle they spend their spring and winter at. Why wouldn't it be in the summer court castle? Maybe they tell us, but I forgot. I don't know why we it has to be somewhere here. Rhys and Amren are distracting everyone else, but Feyre has to be careful in her searching. She obviously can't look like she's looking for something or ask too specific of questions. She can't be have you guys heard of a mystery book? Do you know where it is? Because she can't arouse suspicion, and she always so she has to play it cool. So she always sleeps in, takes a long bath. She isn't up first thing searching the city. While walking through the city, she realizes that people here don't recognize her in the same way that they did in the spring court. And it's the first time she's really been left alone to explore a ruined city. Because when she was with Tamlin in the spring court, but she went with all these guards and with these emissaries, and it was a very small field trip, as we saw with Lucian. I actually think she only got to do it once. And obviously she's been alone and been able to wander around Valaris freely, but Valaris wasn't touched really by Amarantha's rule. So this is the first time she's really encountering the effects of Amarantha and Under the Mountain on a city. She sees whole buildings that have been reduced to rubble and destruction, and sees how much Amarantha just destroyed these towns. And she also sees all the people, not just the High Fae, but these people, and because they're right by the sea, there's a lot of mermaid-esque people with gills and things. And she realizes that she saved those people too. That she saved a lot of people from Amarantha, and it doesn't completely wash away the guilt of having murdered those fairies under the mountain, but it does lighten the load a little. At the end of the second day, she's headed back to the palace. She sees Amren and Varian again. They're sitting up on a balcony again, blatantly ignoring each other aggressively in one spot. And Feyre describes it as a cat playing with a dog. Amren being the cat, of course. And she's about to go back inside when she looks behind her, and she notices a small building that has been revealed because it's low tide, and it's in this tidal causeway around the castle. And as soon as she sees it, she knows something is in there. Her magic immediately wakes up. And she doesn't know that it's the book for sure, but she knows that she needs to search it. She knows that it's going to be important and somehow. That night they have dinner with everyone, and it's very clear that Tarquin is still working very hard to get this alliance between him and Rhysand. He's really putting his best foot forward, and Feyre tells the story about how during the day she had gone and she had talked with some sailors, and they had cooked her fish right with their fishes fresh off the boat, and it was so delicious, and everyone is delighted by this story, and Tarquin's I've never even done that before. And she's also wearing the necklace that Tarquin gave her. It's the only piece of jewelry she's wearing. She's selected this outfit especially to show it off. And Tarquin seems quite pleased with it. And Feyre very casually brings up that little building she saw to Tarquin, suggesting they could go for a walk together to look at it first thing in the morning. And as soon as she says this, Cressida stops speaking. and stops moving. And Feyre's like, oh, well, I've seen most of the city by now. They're like on an island. Maybe we could like walk by it on the way to the mainland. And she notices the way Tarquin looks at Cressida, and it's like very clear that like something about the stone building is incredibly like secret, important, highly guarded. They're feeling incredibly defensive around it. And Tarquin is like, it's just a temple ruin. It's just like mud and seaweed at this point. We've been meaning to repair it for years, but like it's really nothing. And Feyre's like, oh, okay, for sure. Like I've had enough mud for a while. Again, like trying to like reference her time under the mountain to like remind them that she's helpful. She's not a threat. Like they shouldn't be scared of her. But Tarquin's eyes hold hers for a moment, and she knows like she's going to have to do more. And so she uses that moment to hurl her magic towards him. And she comes up against a mental shield that is made up of ocean, like coral and those sorts of things. And so she becomes ocean to slip past it. And she just like plucks, she says the thoughts about his suspicions around her are like pebbles. And she just like plucks them out of the air and instead sends back waves of thoughts that are like, she is harmless, she is kind and sad and broken. You saw her with your people. You saw how she treated them, how she treats you. Amarantha did not break that kindness. Take her to the mainland tomorrow. That'll keep her from asking out the temple. She saved Prithian. She is your friend. Just like really soothing any suspicions that he wouldn't have had. As soon as the last of that wariness fades, Feyre pops back to the table and pretends like nothing has happened. Everyone seems to be like none the wiser, and they like kind of move on with conversation. And Tarquin's like, yeah, perfect. I'll take you to the mainland tomorrow. Tarquin says, perfect, we'll meet up after breakfast and I'll take you to the mainland unless Rhysand wants me for more meetings. And Rhys, keeping up the charade, all casual and smooth, says, by all means, Tarquin, spend the day with my lady. And Feyre lingers on those last words. My lady, what an interesting choice of words. And it is interesting, isn't it, Feyre? We can't linger forever. After dinner, they head back to their rooms, and Amren and Rhys come into Feyre's room to like debrief and hatch a plan. None of the guest rooms look out over the causeway. They're all like facing the other direction. Clearly, they don't want anyone to notice it. And Rhys is like, oh my gosh, you did so good with the mind control. Amren hasn't come in yet. He is like, you were so impressive with the mind control, with Tarquin, with the way you were able to slip into his mind by being in the ocean. Like, it normally takes Damonte like many years to master that. Like, I'm so impressed with you. And Feyre's like, you knew I was doing that? And Rhys is like, yeah, for sure. It was like so impressive. And Feyre is feeling like really yucky about it. And they have some conversation around kind of the ethics of mind control. And Rhys is like, today was like very necessary. If you hadn't have said something, like it could have been incredibly dangerous for us. I took care of Cressida and Varian, but like you needed to take care of Tarquin. Like today the benefits outweigh the downsides, but like, yeah, it does feel icky. And like, if you ever lose that feeling, like you should check it with yourself. Cause this is like, it's a serious thing to go into someone's mind and kind of alter it. Or even to like snoop around. And Feyre's like, what were the benefits when you went into my mind all those times? And Rhys says, there are parts of your mind I left undisturbed, things that belonged solely to you and always will. As to the rest, you scared the shit out of me for a long while, Feyre. Checking in that way, I couldn't well stroll into the spring court and ask how you were doing, could I? I'll explain the rest another time. And then Amren walks in and is like, why would they hide that book in that room, that building that's underwater most of the day? That seems like a dumb place to hide a book. And Rhys is like, it's the last place anyone would look. And it'd be easy to spell a book against wet and decay. Plus, it's only visible for like brief moments throughout the day. It's actually like a pretty good spot. And so they make a plan. Tomorrow night during low tide, Rhys will fly them out there because they probably can't winnow in. And then Rhys will like fly around and keep watch while Amren and Feyre go in. And Feyre is like, the locks in this place respond to Tarquin's touch. Hopefully they respond to mine. They talk through the plan a little bit more. And at the end, Rhys says to Feyre, you think like an Illyrian. And Amren is like, I believe that's supposed to be a compliment. And then the girlies head out for an evening walk to investigate. The next day, Feyre does get her little tour of the mainland from Tarquin, and she meets so many people. Tarquin is like introducing her to just so many people as they go through the city, and they're like all so excited to meet her. And she knows by the end of the day tomorrow that they will all be calling her like liar and thief and deceiver. And Feyre's like, I hope Tarquin will realize like we didn't mean any harm, like we didn't do this out of malice, but because like it was a necessary thing that we needed to do. But she also kind of realizes that like probably this is the end of their cutie little alliance for now. And they make it through the day. They make it through dinner, knowing that this is their like last evening here. Rhysand has like gotten a note from Night Court that's like requests their return. So they're headed back to Night Court the next day. I mean, they're headed back imminently, but they pretend they're going to be headed back the next day. And that night, Feyre is just like feeling so bad, like literally so bad. Like, girlie needs to work on her guilt complex. Like, if you're going to be out here doing things and like investigating and doing all this sort of stuff, like, you're going to need to not be so upset every time you hurt someone's feelings and you do something a little mean. You're just stealing something. You're stealing something you need. He doesn't even use it. You're fine. But that night at dinner, as she's leaving, Tarquin kisses her cheek and says, "I wish this wasn't your last evening. Hopefully I can visit you soon." And Feyre is like, oh, she thinks to herself, I almost fell to my knees and begged for his forgiveness. That night, when she returns to her room, she finds Illyrian fighting leathers waiting for her, along with a belt of Illyrian knives. So she dresses for battle. So now it's time for the plan to take place. Rhys flies them down at low tide, dropping them off before taking the skies to keep watch. It is very gross. The whole area is covered in sea mud and barnacles and all sorts of like slimy ocean mess, but Feyre can feel it. Like, as soon as they get down to the building, she knows like the Book of Breathings is certainly inside. She describes it as like a clawed hand running up her spine. That's what the magic feels like. But she also knows that the power is sleeping. So it's like not at its full strength. They have to dig their way in because the entrance is so like thickly covered with mud. And even as they dig, she can hear the book whispering to her, here, here, here inside. They dig and dig until they're completely covered in this like salty, sandy mud. And it made me think, like, do you think that this mud is like really moisturizing and refreshing? Like, is their skin going to be like so supple and nourished tomorrow? Or do you think they're going to be crusty tomorrow? I was initially thinking crusty, but then like if you go to like the Dead Sea, that mud is like really good for you. Sometimes, and when like right after you go to the beach, I feel like your skin is like really exfoliated. I feel like they'll probably be looking like so refreshed in the morning, spa day. Amren points out that the door has been sealed and it's like very clear that no one has been down there in a long time. And Feyre's like, if no one has been down here for such a long time, like it seems like Tarquin has definitely never been down here, and probably his ancestor hadn't even been down here, then like why are they so obsessed with this book? Why won't they let anyone else see it? And Amren replies, wouldn't you want to lock away an object of terrible power so no one could use it for evil or for their own gain? Or perhaps they locked it away as a bargaining chip if it ever became necessary. I have no idea why they, of all the courts, were granted the half of the book in the first place, but there's no time to keep discussing it. They know they need to move quickly, so they don't get caught, one, but also because the tide is going to come in quite soon. Feyre presses her hand to the door, placing it on a small whirl that's supposed to unlock it, and wait. She tries to like channel Tarquin's magic, and it doesn't work initially. She keeps focusing so hard that her hands like literally shapeshift into Tarquin's hands, which is enough to make the door unlock. As soon as she opens it, they see this spiral staircase that leads down into the depths of this little room. And Amren can feel the magic now, and she says, I never saw the cauldron, but it must be terrible indeed if even a grain of its power feels like this. They descend the spiral staircase, and they find themselves in this chamber that is already like chest deep with water. The tide is already starting to kind of like come in. Obviously is like clearly normally full. Feyre quickly understands why, like, this place isn't actually that heavily warded. Like, Amren didn't really sense any warrants on the outside. It's just like incredibly dangerous because of the ocean. Like, the ocean really acts as the major deterrent here. Only a fool would go in, she says. They reach another locked door, and again, Feyre has to channel all of Tarquin's magic to get inside. This time, she doesn't have to fully transform into him, but then the lock opens for her more easily. But she is getting tired now from using all of this magic and channeling Tarquin's power. In fact, she's starting to feel like a bit faint, and she hopes that there's not more that she's going to need to unlock. Luckily, there isn't another door. Instead, there's just like a dry chamber that has like an invisible barrier that's holding the water back. It like almost looks like a glass wall. They step through, and Amren's again, like, there are no wards, no spells. You just have to carry it out as they like come into the small room, and there's a metal box on the table that clearly has like the Book of Breathings. And then Feyre hears the Book of Breathings whisper to her, "Who are you? What are you? Come closer. Let me smell you. Let me see you." And they can see in the next room over the tide coming in like pretty quickly. And Feyre thinks to herself, like, it shouldn't be coming back this quickly. And Amren responds, "Perhaps the sea knows. Perhaps the sea is the High Lord's servant." And Feyre knows they have to go. She doesn't have enough water magic to like hold the sea out, and they will clearly drown in this space if they are unable to like get out of the building before the tide fully comes in. And then she hears the book whispering louder, "Who are you? Who are you? Who are you?" And Feyre responds to it with her magic. "I am Tarquin. I am High Lord. I am your master." The box goes quiet then, and Feyre picks it up. And as soon as she picks it up, an ancient, cruel voice hisses, "Liar." And then the door slams shut. And then immediately the room starts to flood with water. Amren and Feyre are like freaking out as they're like tossed by waves in this room. And the water is filling it faster and faster. Amren's able to like hold the door open for Feyre to get through. But as soon as they get through it, it locks behind them. And now it's filling up this like hallway space. And they're like trying to rush over to those stairs. And they're trying to climb the stairs faster. Then the water's coming in, but it is like flooding. And it's making it hard to like move through the space. Feyre tries to use the kernel of Tarquin's power to calm the water, but she like can for a little bit, but it's not enough to calm like the whole sea essentially. They hit the stairs and they start climbing. Amren's ahead of her. She's like bracing herself, but they watch in horror as the door at the top of the stairs slides shut, sealing them in, that door that would have let them out into the outside world. So they're now locked into this upper room, and the room is rapidly filling with water, and Feyre knows she's dead. There's like no way out of this. She's going to drown. She takes like her last big inhale. They're underwater now, and she's like shoving at the door. She's pounding on it. She's trying to like, she watches as her hands transform into like claws and talons, trying to like get out this door, and nothing works. She can't get it to move. But then the door is ripped away, and on the other side are 3 beautiful ethereal faces hissing through fish's teeth. Spindly web fingers snatch them out of the stairs, and these like frog arms like carry them out onto shore. The water wraiths carry them out, and they are pounding on their chests. So they cough up all of the water. So Amren and Feyre are just like laying there after like puking up a bunch of water. And the 3 sisters look at Feyre and say, "Our sister's debt is repaid." And then they're gone. They're back on the shore. Rhysand is down over them a minute later. He's looking like totally freaked out. And he's like, "What the heck happened to you guys?" And Amren's like, "Where were you?" And Rhys says, "You set off every alarm in that place. I was trying to keep the people distracted. I like thought you had it covered in there." And Amren's like, "That place or that damned book nearly nullified my powers. We almost drowned." And Rhys is like, I didn't feel any of that through the bond." And Amren's like, "You idiot. That place also shut down that magic as well. It shut down the bond." And Rhys is still like freaking out, and he asks, well, did you guys get it? And Feyre touches her jacket where the lead box is sitting beneath it. And Rhys like relaxes a bit, being like, "Good." Guards are like coming down the hill, and Rhys winnows them out just in time, straight to the townhouse foyer and Valeris. And Feyre and Amren like collapse the wooden floor, like spraying salt and sand and water everywhere. And Cassian's like in the dining room, and he's like, "What the heck just happened to you guys?" And Rhys is like, "I don't know. I'm waiting for an explanation too. You and I are both confused." And Feyre says, "During the tithe, the water wraith emissary said they had no gold, no food to pay. They were starving. So I gave her some of my jewelry to pay her dues. She swore that she and her sisters would never forgive the kindness." And Amren starts laughing and says to Feyre, "Only an immortal with a mortal heart would have given one of those horrible beasts money. It's so..." She cut herself off, still laughing, and then says, "Whatever luck you live by, girl. Thank the cauldron for it." And then everyone kind of starts laughing, and the tension sort of breaks. Rhysand dries them off using his magic, and then he like calls them kind of over to the table so they can all look at the book. And as he dries them with their magic, everything dries except the spot on Feyre's jacket where the book is like tucked in her pocket. Like magic can't really like touch the book. Feyre places her hand on top of the box, and then the book speaks to her. It says, "Hello, liar." Feyre answers softly, "Hello." The book says, "Will you read me?" And Feyre says no. And then Feyre commands silently for it to open. And the book responds, "Say please." And Feyre says, "Please." And the book says, "Like calls to like." And Feyre again says, "Open." The book, or the box, I guess we're still trying to get the box open, whispers to her, "Unmade, made, made and unmade. That is the cycle. Like calls to like." Feyre is like exhausted. She's had a rough evening. Remember, this was like the end of the day. She hasn't slept yet. And she channels all of her magic, not just Tarquin's, but like all of her magic into the book, like pressing as hard as she can, letting every piece of herself show up in that moment. And the book says to her, "Curse breaker." And with that, it clicks open. Cassian immediately, not a fan. Cassian is really not into anything spooky. You know, that's just like really not his vibe. And the book's voice was scary. And then he's like, "I do not want to hear that voice ever again." And Rhys says, "Ever practical. Well, you're going to have to, because you're coming with us to see the mortal queens as soon as they deign to visit." They look inside the box. It's not a regular book. It's like a strange, like metal collection of like metal plates that are bound together by rings, a bronze one, a silver one, and a gold one, that are etched with an alphabet Feyre doesn't recognize. And Amren says it's the Lashon Havdavdesh, the Holy Tongue. And Rhys admits that he had hoped the book would be written in a language that Amren could understand. And he was like, "I didn't want to raise your hopes, but this seems like the kind of thing that might be able to send you back to where you came from." Guys, do you think these are word marks? I just thought about that. I think these are word marks. That's not a spoiler, I don't think. But I think they're word marks. That's what I've decided right now. As you know, my favorite theories are completely based in vibes and not facts. And so the vibes I want are always I want Aelin to be here. When does Aelin get here, actually, guys? She doesn't show up in the series, really. In a devastating turn of events. This is a different series, and it's not Throne of Glass. Back to Rhys. Rhys thought if this book was like as old and as powerful as they thought, like maybe it would have the like way to send Amren back home. And Amren is like, okay, well, I need the other piece before I can really start to decode it. And Rhys is like, okay, well, hopefully we'll get an answer from the queens soon. And then Amren says, like, thank you for like thinking of her. And Feyre realizes that Amren has spent 10,000 years in exile, like essentially alone. Like she hasn't had any of her people with her. And she's been like stuck in this strange body that doesn't belong to her. Azriel then brings up Jurian again and how he still doesn't totally understand why the King of Hybern would want to wake up Jurian. That like doesn't totally add up to him. And then they mention Miriam and Draken again and kind of wondering how it's all connected. During this, Amren tells the story of what happened with them long ago. Across the table, this is a quote. Across the table, I lifted my gaze from the cloche and found Rhys's eyes already on me. I inclined my head slightly and lowered my shield, only long enough to say down the bond, to the dreams that are answered. A heartbeat later, a sensual caress trailed along my mental shields, a polite request. I let it drop, let him in, and let his voice fill my head, to the huntress who remembered to reach back for those less fortunate, and the water wraiths who swim very, very fast. Feyre takes like a super long nap because she's exhausted from staying up literally all night and then like almost drowning. You know, it'd make you want to nap. And then she sits in the garden for a while, but as the sun starts to set, she like heads up to the rooftop. The like house is blocking the sun, and she wants to like watch the sunset from the rooftop. She gets up there, and Rhys is already up there, and Feyre like sees him, and she's like, "Hey, if you want to be by yourself, that's like totally fine. I can leave." But he just like gestures for her to sit down at the empty seat. He's like clearly drinking and having like not his favorite day. And Rhys is like, "I did think for a while about asking Tarquin to just like give us the book, but like I couldn't risk the information getting out. Like, regardless of whether Tarquin would have allowed them to take it, having him have access to that information was just too risky. They need to keep this secret for as long as possible so the King of Hybern doesn't find out. He doesn't know who to trust." And he's really sad because, again, Rhys really values male friendship, and he really thinks that him and Tarquin could have been bros. And he talks about how none of the other High Lords have ever tried to strike up a friendship with Rhys, and he was really like, he loved the idea of being friends with Tarquin. Unfortunately, that is like pretty much gone because Tarquin sent them a box with blood rubies, which is essentially like an official declaration of a price on their heads, like that, he would like them gone. And Rhys says the box arrived an hour ago with 3 rubies, one for him, one for Amren, and one for Feyre. He admits he probably should have wiped the minds of all the guards that he encountered that night instead of just knocking them out. Like, it probably would have made them safer, but he just like wasn't thinking about his full scope of powers. And he recognizes that like he made a mistake, and now Tarquin knows that they have the book. And Feyre's like, it's not a big deal. And Rhys is like, you've just been told you're the number 1 enemy of the Summer Court, and you're fine with that? And Feyre's like, I'm not fine with it, but I don't blame you for it. Like, mistakes happen. And Feyre's like, well, maybe if we like give the book back after we like deal with the Hybern situation, Tarquin won't be so mad at us anymore, and you guys can be friends again. And Rhys is like, no, because Amren needs that book. She needs it for as long as she needs it, and I'm not gonna like betray Amren just to like maybe become friends with Tarquin. And Feyre's like, okay, well, maybe you could make it up to Tarquin in some other way. Like, clearly you want to be his friend. Like, you could probably figure it out. And Rhys is like, feuds like this can last millennia, but it's the cost of winning more. I'm willing to pay it. And Feyre says, does anyone else know about the blood rubies? And Rhys is like, yeah, Azriel was the one who brought them to me, so like he knows. I haven't told Amren yet because I'm worried that she's gonna just like suggest that we go wipe Atria off the map. Why is she your second? It's not a very diplomatic response to this. Whatever. Feyre is still trying to make Rhys feel better after his no good, very bad, very terrible day. And she says to him, get through this war, Rhysand, then worry about Tarquin and the blood rubies, and nullify the cauldron, stop the king from shattering the wall and enslaving the human realm again, and then we'll figure out the rest. And Rhys responds, it sounds as if you plan to stay here for a while. And Feyre says, I mean, like, I can move out of the house if you don't want me here, if that's what you're meaning by that. And then maybe I can use my generous paycheck to buy myself a house, something lavish. And she's like trying to play in the same way that Rhys does when she's sad. Like, Rhys like tries to like tease her to like pull her out of her sadness, and Feyre's using the same playbook for him. Rhys says to her, spare your paycheck, you can buy whatever you want, you've already been added to the official accounts, buy yourself a house on my credit if you wish. Okay. Girlie was just like, I don't know if Rhys just likes me as a friend. Girl, he just said, you have access to all of my accounts, buy a house for yourself. Gorgeous, gorgeous. Do you remember when Tamlin was like, this is the dream, Feyre. Why don't you want it? Girls just want to wear pretty dresses and be in a castle. And I was like, that is kind of the dream. And then Rhys said, this is the dream. The dream is not to be locked in a castle. The dream is to have endless funds in a beautiful city. And he was correct. That does sound more fun. And Feyre is like, could I use that credit to buy pretty lacy things, or should those come out of my personal funds? And Rhys is like, I'm not really in the mood right now. And Feyre like keeps pushing, keeps teasing, refusing to let him wallow in this melancholy. And she just like keeps poking at him for being like such a grumpy man, being so somber and melancholy in this moment. The vibes are so flirty. So flirty. Perhaps the flirtiest we've seen yet. Even flirtier than the looking conversation, to be honest. And Feyre's like, maybe I'll just tell Tarquin he can see me in these pretty lacy things if he just forgives us. And Rhys is like, no, I think he'll take that as a threat. And Feyre just keeps pushing. I don't know. I gave him a few smiles and he handed over a family heirloom. I bet he'd give me the keys to his territory if I showed up wearing some undergarments. And Rhys says, someone thinks very highly of herself. And Feyre is like, why shouldn't I? You have difficulty not staring at me day and night. And Rhys says, am I supposed to deny that I find you attractive? Feyre says, you never tell me. And Rhys says, I should do a better job of it, shouldn't I? And now the melancholy is gone. He says, actually, I feel better now. And he looks at Feyre and with what Feyre describes as a predator's gaze, the gaze of the most powerful male in Prythian. I wish we didn't have to say that. Ugh. He says to her, why don't we go down to that store right now, Feyre, and you can try on lacy things so I can help you pick out which one to send to Tarquin. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, Azriel shows up and ruins the moment. Feyre immediately feels yucky. She kind of remembers and realizes that she officially broke up with Tamlin a week ago. It hasn't been really that long. It feels a little soon to be jumping so fully into something else, and she's not sure she's ready for it. But also she starts to imagine how the rest of the evening would have gone if Azriel hadn't shown up. They would have gone to that shop and Rhys would have looked at her like that, and she would have sat with him and then been with him, and she realizes maybe it would have been too much too soon. And then she realizes this whole little spicy vision of her going to a lingerie shop with Rhys in her head was planted by Rhys himself. He snuck in there and planted it. How rude. And she yells at him through the eyeball tattoo on her palm. And then she takes a very, very cold bath. That night, Feyre has dinner with Mor at the townhouse, and Rhys is somewhere else. And Mor can immediately tell that Feyre is mad at Rhysand, and she asks about it. And Feyre explains the vision that Rhysand planted in her head, and Mor just starts laughing. And Mor tells Feyre she should be really proud, because normally when Rhys has decided to be in one of his little moods, it's very hard. It's impossible to pull him out, and Feyre was able to. And so Feyre is feeling a little proud of herself as she goes to bed. She heads to bed. It's pretty late. It's after 2 a.m, I think we're told, because Mor and her stayed up chatting for a long time. And as she's settling in, she feels the room, the house itself begin to groan. She can feel the house shifting. She feels darkness rolling through it, and she recognizes it. She recognizes it as Rhys's darkness, but it's not his typical darkness. It is laced with pain and grief and despair, and she doesn't know exactly where Rhys's bedroom is, but she follows the thread between them towards Rhys, and she opens the door to this room filled with darkness. And so she's feeling her way along. She gets to the bed, she climbs in the bed, she's calling for him, trying to find him in his bed. She eventually does, and she's trying to shake him awake, but he's still sleeping, and she slaps him, and it still won't work. And she starts pulling on the bond, shouting down at his name like it's a tunnel between them, banging against the wall in his mind. And finally it works, and he wakes up and he immediately grabs her, flips her over like a talon at her throat. Feyre doesn't freak out though. She just says through the bond to him, hey Rhys, it's me, it's Feyre. And the darkness around them shudders. Feyre throws out her own power to him, and she describes it like this. My darkness sang his own a lullaby, a song my wet nurse had hummed when my mother had shoved me into her arms to go back to attending parties. It was a dream, she says to him. And then the darkness pauses. She sends out her own little veils of night brushing against her darkness, trying to soothe his darkness. And for a heartbeat, the inky blackness clears enough that she sees his face hovering above her, and she keeps soothing him, reminding him who she is, who he is, and that he was dreaming. Slowly the darkness melts away, and Rhysand says her name Feyre, and his voice is so hoarse, as if he had been screaming. He pulls the talon away from her throat, and he's oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean. Feyre's it's okay, you were having a nightmare and you were flooding the entire house with darkness. And he's I'm so sorry, I normally it's contained to my room. And he still has his wings and his claws out, but he's coming back to himself slowly. And Feyre is this is why you stay here and not at the House of Wind, so the others don't see this. And Rhys is like, normally I like am able to keep it contained in my room. Like, I'm sorry. And Feyre says, how often does this happen? And Rhys says, almost as often as you have nightmares. Like, that's how often mine happen. And Feyre asks, what did you dream of tonight? And Rhys replies, there are memories from under the mountain, Feyre, that are best left unshared, even with you. And Feyre like understands. She understands that. But she says to him, if you ever want to talk, let me know. I won't tell the others. And Rhys just says, thank you. And she like is able to kind of like see him for the first time without like the mask he wears in front of others. He like really puts on a pretense of like being fine, but she can tell now that he is like tired and in pain and like struggling with Under the Mountain in a similar way that she is. Like, they're still both really grappling with this thing. And so she leans in and just kisses his cheek, offering him just like a little bit of softness, a little bit of comfort that she wishes she would have when she wakes up from those nightmares. The next day, Feyre's over at Amren's house talking about the Book of Breathings, and we get a little bit more about Amren. We find out that she lives on the top floor in kind of this like studio apartment, this like gorgeous studio apartment, overlooking the Sidra, which is the river that runs through Valaris. And Feyre's asking for updates on the Book of Breathings and how long Amren thinks the translation work is gonna go. And Amren is like, well, I'm not sure because I need to kind of relearn the language that it is written in because it's been a while since she's used it. And we also hear that Rhys left a note in the townhouse before he left. He was gone before breakfast, but Feyre reads the note and it says, thank you for last night. He doesn't leave a pen, but Feyre finds one. And Feyre asks Rhys, because she had seen him, I think he was butt naked last night. I don't think I mentioned that, but I do believe he was not wearing clothes. So she saw his knees for the first time and she asked him, what do the tattooed stars and mountains on your knees mean? And Rhys replies, that I will bow before no one and nothing but my crown. Hold that in your brain. Hold that in your brain. Because guess who was on their knees for Feyre last video? My guy. My guy was on his knees for Feyre. What does it mean? Feyre goes so dramatic. Then Feyre had headed over to Amren's. She stopped at the butcher and picked up blood for Amren. So sweet. Feyre offers to heat it up, but Amren just drinks it down immediately, and she's glad. It was lamb blood, which is Amren's favorite. She actually doesn't like human blood that much because it's typically kind of watery in taste of what they last ate. And Feyre like mentions that she's surprised that Amren's place is so simple. She like knows how much Rhys pays her and assumes Amren is compensated more than her, so she could afford something much nicer. And Amren's like, well, I tried someplace fancier, but I got bored of it. And there were too many servants that were too nosy. And I prefer this. It also means I don't have to host. And then Amren is like, why are you here? And Feyre's like, Cassian said you'd been holed up here and I thought you might be hungry. And I had nothing else to do. And Amren says, Cassian is a busybody. And Feyre's like, did Rhysand wind up convincing you not to destroy Adriata for the blood ruby? And Amren says, he did no such thing. That convinced me not to destroy Adriata. And she points over to the dresser where there's this like gorgeous like diamond and ruby snake necklace that was sent to her by Varian to soften the threat of the blood diamonds. And Feyre's like, so are you guys like together? Did you guys like hook up? What's the deal? And Amren is like, no. Tempting, but no. The prick can't decide if he hates me or if he wants me. And Feyre's like, why not both? Feyre, the secret enemies to lovers stand. And Amren goes, indeed. Then comes weeks of waiting, we're told, as Amren works to decode the manuscript and we wait to hear back from the mortal queens. Asriel is like super busy and we are really only hearing like the vaguest of updates about him through Mor. And Feyre is just like kind of curious. We just hear again and again about the dynamics between Asriel, Cassian, and Mor. These dynamics don't really interest me, so I don't pay a ton of attention to them. But there's like a weird little love triangle happening there. Feyre is training with Cassian and she explains that he is like giving her diet advice on how to like gain back weight healthily and like to get muscle back on her frame. And I'm not going to get into it like a lot right now because I think I'm going to make a whole video on it. But I think the way Romantasy in particular treats women's bodies is like so important. Again, especially Sarah J. Maas. I think there's something really important about this moment in which we're seeing the way Feyre is eating to like take up more space, the way that she withered away and like her smallness was seen as a sign of something bad, and then like her taking up more space and becoming more like physically empowered in her own body is like so crucial to her healing journey. I think is just like fundamentally important and doing like such important work. We also find out that Rhys has been kind of like sending follow-up letters to the Immortal Queens that Cassian has been delivering to Feyre's sisters, and then Feyre's sisters have been delivering or putting in the mail to the Mortal Queens. Rhys is also continuing to train her magic while also teaching her a lot about like the men that she got the magic from and the courts it comes from. She trains so hard that she doesn't have nightmares anymore. She's like too exhausted at the end of the day. And then when Rhys is busy, she either sits with Amren or goes out with more into Valeris. She's like very busy and she can kind of do whatever she wants. And she also has endless money at her disposal, essentially. She's like taking a peek at her accounts and she like is being grossly overpaid, she says. And then we get this exchange. Rhys and her like have this like pen pal relationship where they essentially like text each other via magic pen back and forth when Rhys is gone. And we get this exchange once when he's in a northern city. Rhys writes her a note that says, "Tell me about the painting." And Feyre says, "There's not much to say." And Rhys says, "Tell me about it anyway." I'm obsessed with that. Okay. Feyre says, "There was a time when all I wanted was enough money to keep me and my family fed so that I could spend my days painting. That was all I wanted, ever. And now I don't know what I want. I can't paint anymore. Why? Because part of me is empty." "Did you always want to be High Lord?" Feyre changing the topic. And Rhys says, "Yes and no. I saw how my father ruled and knew from a young age that I did not want to be like him. So I decided to be a different sort of High Lord. I wanted to protect my people, change the perception of the Illyrians, and eliminate the corruption that plagued the land." And Feyre's like, wow, that is so good and noble of this guy. Talon didn't want to be High Lord. Maybe that's why his court had become what it had. But Rhys had a vision and went to the mat for it. Okay, you guys know I love Rhys. I've talked about it before. I love Rhys. He's my favorite Sarah J. Maas man. But I actually don't think we see a lot of evidence of him being like a great High Lord, a great leader for his people. Like, he is a great dreamer. I think he has like great aspirations to do great things. I think he sees that. I also think that like the like foreign politics of him like being aware of these threats that are happening with Hybern and like being proactive against them, I think those are great. But like the internal governing of his court seems like bad. Not to like, give credit to Tamlin, but Feyre, one of the things she kind of like poo-poos from Tamlin is the way he like is like kind of caught up in court politics. Unfortunately, court politics are an important way that you like get things done because of how the Night Court and the Spring Court, all the courts are kind of ruled, is that like the High Lord is in charge of everyone, but there are like different regional lords that are in charge of different areas. And in order to like make real change, you do need to kind of like politic with people that you don't always like and find annoying. And like Rhys truly seems like he really only hangs out with his pals. Like he goes to like meetings and he goes to like deal with things, but he's not like socializing actively a lot with these people that like he really does need on his side if he wants to make some of these bigger changes. You also know that my feelings about Valeris as just like him having one cutie city, which he does live in and bring all his friends to, and then letting the rest of the court be evil, I do think is like kind of abhorrent. Like I think that's maybe the worst way you could run a court. Anyway, so I don't think he's the greatest High Lord. But Feyre says to him, "At least you make up for your shameless flirting by being one hell of a High Lord." Rhys does not send a note back after this, presumably because he wants to save this note and add it to his scrapbook or like pin it to his wall. But when he returns that night, he's smirking and he says, "One hell of a High Lord." And Feyre magically throws a bucket of water on his face. Sometimes later, I think again a couple of weeks later, Feyre wakes to a note from Rhys that says, "No training with your second favorite Illyrian this morning. The queens finally deigned to write back. They're coming to your family estate tomorrow," which means it's Mortal Queenie time. Nesta, they arrive at the family estate. It's at 11 p.m. and that's when the Queenies are meeting with them. So it's evening. Elain and Nesta are dressed to impress. So is Feyre, but she's dressed in the Night Court style. So she's wearing something chiffon and a little scandi. She also has a little diadem on her head. We'll come to find out. Feyre is standing right next to Rhys, who's wearing his classic like all black, but he does have a little crown on that is like made of feathers. And again, she's wearing like a gold diadem for no reason. Just because it went with her outfit, okay? Please don't ask follow-up questions. And Cassian and Azriel are also there, like monitoring from the corner, and Mor's here too. And she's like impatiently waiting there. So Feyre and Mor are like flanking Rhys. Unfortunately, Feyre's plans for Mor to like befriend Nesta and Elain are not going to happen today because Nesta and Elain are kind of terrified of the whole situation. They're not really in the mood to make friends. And at exactly 11, 5 of the queens appear in the living room, flanked by 2 guards each. The queenies can winnow, which is a little strange. The queenies are all very different looking. We get a kind of a brief description. They all are like different heights and ages and colorings, we're told. The oldest is like described sometimes as a crone, and she has like very like sharp, cold, piercing eyes, and she's like pretty wrinkly. She's like old. And then we have 2 middle-aged girls who are in opposition to each other, one smiling, one frowny, one dark, one light, one wearing black, one wearing white, like total opposites. And then we have like a younger one, second to youngest, looking a few years older than Feyre, one with black hair and black eyes, suspicious, oozing cunning from every pore. And then the final queen, the only beautiful one, which, sorry Feyre, that's kind of rude, is like curly blonde hair and described as like a lion in human flesh, this like golden queen. And Feyre realizes how unnecessary the queen's guards are, because like Mor and Rhys and Cassian and Azriel and even her could take all of them. Like it would take less than a thought for them to get rid of all of these 10 guards. And Rhys begins, "We are so grateful you accepted our invitation. Where is the 6th queen?" And the oldest queen says she is unwell and could not make the journey. Suspicious. And then she looks over at Feyre and she says, "You are the emissary?" And Feyre says, "Yes, I am Feyre." And the eldest queen says, you are the High Lord who wrote us such an interesting letter after your first few were dispatched." And Feyre looks kind of like confused. She assumed all the letters contained pretty much the same message. And Rhys just kind of like shrugs and sends down the bond. "You didn't ask what was inside the letter." We'll come back to this. Please hold this moment in your brain. We'll come back. Rhys is like, "Yep, I'm Rhys. This is my cousin Mor again." And then Mor goes, "The Mor again from the war." Okay. Everyone sits down and Feyre kind of like points out her sisters, and they like make some comments about how Elain and Nesta are like hosting them. And then Goldie, the youngest queen, looks over at Feyre and says, "An emissary wears a golden crown. Is that a tradition in Prythian?" And Rhys says, "No, but she certainly looks good in one, and I couldn't resist." Goldie continues, "A human turned into High Fae who is now standing beside a High Lord at the place of honor. Interesting." And the eldest goes, "You have an hour of our time. Make it count." And Mor's like, how can you guys winnow? How did you guys winnow here? And Goldie says, "It's a secret and a gift from your kind." And Rhys explains, kind of like pretty straightforward, the war is coming. They can't do any tricks. Rhys can't go into their minds. He can't do anything because they can't risk activating that like curse that will like melt the Book of Breathings if any like treachery is happening. And the eldest says to them, "We know war is coming. We've been preparing for years." And Feyre's like, "Okay, well, I haven't seen any outside of that with all the humans I know. There's been no preparations here." And Goldie is like, "This territory is like very small compared to the vastness of the continent. It is not in our best interest to waste our resources defending it." And Feyre's like stomach drops. And Rhys says, "Surely the loss of even one innocent life would be abhorrent." And the eldest says, "For sure, but like war is war and sacrifices will need to be made." And Feyre's like, "There are good people here." And Goldie says, "Let the High Fae of Prythian defend them." And Nesta says, speaking up, "We have servants with families. There are children in these lands. And you mean to leave us at the hands of the Fae?" And the eldest says, "It is a difficult choice." And Nesta says, "It is the choice of cowards." And Feyre like cuts off her sister and like tries to reason with them. She doesn't want Nesta to dig them a hole, but like she knows they need to be on their side. But the queenies are standing firm. They're like, "You're talking about all these innocent lives, but like Rhys, you're the one to talk. How many people have you killed? How many minds have you shattered? Peace is what you're after? Peace for a man who melts mind and tortures for sport? I didn't think you knew the word." And Feyre is like, "Okay, well, fine. If you're not going to help us, what about the artifact we requested?" And the eldest says, "Our half of the book does not leave the sacred palace. It has not and will not while we rule." And Feyre says, "Please." She like really feels like this is her responsibility as the emissary to convince them that they like need to help. And she tells the story how she was killed by just one commander of Hybern and how much destruction Amarantha wreaked as just like one commander, and that the like war will cause destruction for everyone. Humans will end up slaves for generations if they do not step in and help, if they do not give them the Book of Breathings. And as she again asks, "Please give us the book." And the eldest says, "You are a young child. You have much to learn about the ways of the world." And Rhys says, "Do not condescend to her. Do not insult Feyre for speaking with her heart, with compassion for those who cannot defend themselves, when you speak only from selfishness and cowardice." And the eldest says, "For the greater good." And Rhys says, "Many atrocities have been done in the name of the greater good." And the eldest continues, like, "The book will remain with us. We will weather this storm." And then Mor says, "That's enough. I'm the Mor again. My gift is truth." I don't know what that means. I don't think anyone knows what that means. So you will hear my words now, and you will hear them as truth. And then she kind of like talks about her time in the original war that took place over 500 years ago with the humans and the Fae, and how she was like with Miriam when they freed the human slaves, fighting alongside like Prince Draken. She knew the queens who signed that original treaty between the Fae and the humans, and she knows those queens would be ashamed of these queens. And she tells the story about how Miriam and Draken now live on an island where humans and Fae coexist and live in peace. Like, it is possible. She has seen it with her eyes. And Rhys is like, more! Because that was a secret. Like, Miriam and Draken have lived on this island in secret for 500 years. And Mor just, like, spilled it for essentially no reason. Kind of rude of her. And then the eldest is like, okay, fine. We'll consider it if you can give us proof that you are a male of peace. And Feyre realizes, like, the only proof that would work, the only way to prove this to them would be to show them Valeris. And she, like, doesn't want to. Like, Valeris has been safe for so long because it has been so secret. And so to kind of betray that secrecy feels, not great, not ideal. And Rhys says, you desire proof? I shall get it for you. Await my word and return when we summon you. And the Golden One says, we are summoned by no one, human or Fae. And Rhys says, then come at your leisure. Perhaps then you'll comprehend how vital the book is to both of our efforts. And the eldest is like, we'll consider it once we have proof. And then the Goldie says, good luck. And then poof, they disappear. And as soon as they're gone, Elain says, I hope they all burn in hell. And we love that. Love that from Elain. Okay. That is where we're going to leave our girlies right now, with the Mortal Queens being like, no book of breathings for you. Just like a quick trip to Summer Court, quick check-in about Book of Breathings. I'll see you next week with everyone's favorite chapters. We're going to get Feyre's visit down to the Court of Nightmares. The crowd goes wild. And I do believe we get a visit to the mountain cabin as well. I think that's what we have in store for us in the next video. It'll be so fun. So excited to go there with you. See you then. Subscribe if you aren't already so you know when that video pops up, because who knows when. A schedule never even met her. I'm thinking sometime next weekend though. All right. Talk to you then. Bye.